Mics are hot. Welcome into Hardcore Penn State Football. It is finally here. Penn State's first inaugural ever playoff football game this Saturday. Shawn, Kane, and I will be breaking down and previewing the game, giving you our predictions, transfer portal news, some fan questions, all that and more in this week's episode. If you haven't already, please make sure to like the video and subscribe wherever you're listening on podcast platform. Let's get right into the show. Welcome into Hardcore Penn State Football. I'm Cory Lestochi. With me, as always, the great Shawn Kane. How you doing today, Shawn?
Not too bad, Cory. I was just telling you I have a little bit of a cold, but nothing really too concerning.
Blue game.
Yeah. And then I'm really excited for these playoff matchups this weekend.
What's got you so excited?
Well, I mean, maybe I'm buying into the hype a little bit. I sound like a commercial, but Indiana and Notre Dame tomorrow.
That's right.
Which, I mean, all Indiana rivalry, biggest game ever for the Indiana Hoosiers.
Right.
Of course, our game. And then Texas Clemson. I mean, I feel like I have a pretty good idea how that one's going to go. And then the Ohio State Tennessee game. That one, I have no idea what's going to happen. I have a hunch, but I really don't know.
You're confident in that Texas Clemson game?
I feel like it. Yeah, I think Texas will win.
I don't know how confident I am in that. I think Clemson's a little bit better than people think, and I don't know how good Texas is.
I mean, they did just lose to a backup quarterback, which discourages me a little bit, and they really haven't beat anybody all year.
Right.
But I don't know. Maybe I'm just hoping Clemson isn't that good because I just don't like Dabo that much.
I know. I understand that. No, I mean, I think Texas is a better team, but I just got a feeling this game's going to be a lot closer than people are giving Clemson credit to. And I just think it comes back to I don't think the SEC was that great this year. I think Texas and Georgia are good football teams. I would venture to say they're not any more scary than Indiana. Maybe a smidgen more scary, but barely.
Maybe. I mean, I also think Indiana's a little bit better than people are giving them credit for.
Right.
I don't think they play like it. And even if during that Ohio State game, did they play well? No, they got killed. But I felt like that game turned on the special teams.
Absolutely.
And I do think if there wasn't those couple special teams mishaps, the game would have been much closer than it ended up being.
Absolutely. If you hadn't seen the news, Georgia quarterback Carson Beck is out for the playoff. So if Penn State were to get to the semifinal, I'd be expecting that we would probably see Notre Dame versus Georgia, but who knows? We'll see. Shawn, we're going to get to SMU in a second. Wanted to just quickly update the transfer portal world. Obviously, we broke the news live on, was that Monday night? That seems like forever ago. Monday night with USC wide receiver Kyron Hudson announcing his commitment to Penn State, which, again, I will just give him a lot of credit because the weather was not very nice for a Cali boy last weekend. And he saw that weather and he was committed. So he might be crazy. We'll have to figure that out. But at least from what we can tell right now, he's a solid pickup. USC has had quite the exodus of players hitting the transfer portal. So I don't think the players leaving USC is quite done yet. Other than that, Shawn, some names that we mentioned, Bear Alexander. I think that name is still a name to potentially know. I think maybe it's cooled off a little bit on the David Blay train. Another name we were mentioning in the receiver world of things. I already forgot his first name again, but Mr. Rivers out in FIU. That name's calmed down a little bit as well. But we don't think they're done at wide receiver. We think they're still potentially looking for another wide receiver out there. I think we have a fan question on receiver specifically. And then we mentioned Eni White last time, former defensive end from Emotep. in Philly. Penn State's obviously recruited quite well in that area. Currently at Texas A&M, he's in the portal. That's another name to continue to look out for. He visited last weekend as well. So there's a little bit of an update for you. I think Penn State's going to add at least 3 more players, if I had to guess.
That sounds about right. Yeah, and it seems like there's a real emphasis on defensive tackle and receiver, which isn't really something that's too big of a departure from how James Franklin has looked at the portal in the past.
Right.
Typically, he looks for needs and fills them. He's not. First off, I think it's a choice. James Franklin is a more traditional style coach where recruiting is the big thing. And I also don't think he has the luxury of going after a luxury player like Ohio State did with Quinshon Judkins last year, and they really didn't quote unquote need him. But
Right.
I think Franklin kind of prefers it this way, to go look at what we need, go get it, and then call it a day in the portal.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we've now seen Clemson go and get 2 players in the transfer portal. So even the ones that have been fighting it have now gone in and grabbed a couple. So that's just the way it is. But I think that Franklin made that really kind of interesting distinction between Penn State and SMU. Forget the exact number, but SMU has a ton of players in the transfer portal in relation to Penn State. I mean, it's like, I don't want to say the number was 70, but it was an alarming number of players. I got to look that up just to remember the statistic, but it was insane.
Makes some sense though.
Yeah.
Moving up a level. And I know the ACC doesn't get the kind of respect from Big Ten folk that maybe ACC people think they should get, but that's a big step up from the AAC to the ACC. So you need to kind of have the horses, no pun intended, to be able to run in that conference.
Yeah, and they've gone and got a couple guys too. They've added already a running back from Miami, a center from Arkansas, and a interior offensive lineman from Oklahoma. So they've already added a handful more. SMU's recruiting classes from Landon Tangwall. SMU's recruiting classes, 82nd and 72nd the past 2 years. Their transfer portal ratings 14th and 13th. So 20 of SMU's 22 starters are from the transfer portal. Again, that's from Landon Tangwall.
Yeah, that's kind of the Deion approach, right?
A little bit, to a certain degree. Trying to see if there's anyone else that had popped in there that I wanted to mention from it. But yeah, I can't find that quote from Franklin, but it was a bunch. It was a bunch, to say the least. Let's get to some fan questions. Didn't pull up the graphic this time. We're just gonna sidearm hip shoot it this time. First question here is from Dorito Bandit, longtime listener to the show. Do we have any other transfer wide receivers on the radar at this point? Where are we with Malachi Fields? And then the other question I had asked was your thoughts on the game not being sold out. And a lot of answers were talking about Christmas, hotels, expensive. People are saving up for future trips. All that seems relevant. But Shawn, receivers, they already have Kyron Hudson. We believe that they are not quite done there, but it's not evidently clear on who that next wide receiver may be.
Yeah, I don't think it's something that's definitely set in stone right now. Like last year, I remember it was pretty obvious that Julian Fleming was at least strongly considering Penn State. And then he ended up at Penn State. But yeah, I think Rivers, I don't think that's happening now. But I know there was a receiver from, I believe it was Tulsa, that was up that Penn State might be engaged with as well. But there's a lot. It's hard to say right now, to be completely honest with you, because I don't know how they're going to do visits. If they're going to do visits this week, I don't know if Cory's seen anything about that. Um,
I think they can do visits, but the player has to get their own seat. They can't do like a true
correct. We
recruit
can't
game.
host. Yeah,
So
we can't host. Now they,
Eric
like
Rivers
Cory
is his
said, they could
first name,
come
by the
up,
way.
but it's not really. I don't think it's with the way State College is right now. Part of what you mentioned there too, um, with hotels. I don't know if a player necessarily wants, and his family wants to go and pay for a hotel that's hundreds and hundreds of dollars that's about 30 miles away from State College. I don't know if that's something that's really appealing to
Probably
too
not.
many kids this weekend. So I don't think there'll be all that many transfer portal kid and portal kids too. They don't need to really have the full experience like high school kids. They've already played college ball, so I'm not anticipating really many visitors at all from anybody this weekend. Maybe a kid or two from high school, but that'd really be it.
Yeah, welcome in Cowboy Ribeye on YouTube. Appreciate you hanging out with us. And then Michael Higgins says this is completely just fans of sources here. But Michael Higgins says Troy wide receiver Devontae Ross is on campus.
Troy, that's yep, not Tulsa.
Have not officially seen that, but fans of sources coming at you hot from Michael Higgins. Ross, I believe, did have 3 touchdowns against Iowa. So I don't know. I believe his first team Sun Belt. So if sources are true on that one, that would be an interesting one for. I think Ross also visited Oklahoma. So some other people in the mix there. We'll see what happens there, but I don't think they're done at wide receiver, to answer that question and to round that one out. I think we have a question on Omari Evans, so I want to wait there. Let me just double check and see. Oh, yeah, there is. Let's go to that question next. This question here is from Mudbug, the Pick'em winner. Worried that Omari Evans could hit the portal. Do you have any concerns? I think he's good for 400 plus yards next year. So if you didn't see, Omari Evans did tweet. See if I can find the exact tweet. He did tweet the other day. Unless he already deleted it. No, he tweeted on the 16th a crying laughing face. Which the 16th was Monday. That was when Kyron Hudson announced his commitment. So take that for what you will. Don't know exactly what that means. But probably doesn't like the idea that they're going into the portal and grabbing a couple guys. I think you do have to be a little bit concerned. The good news for Omari Evans, unlike the rest of these transfer portal wide receivers, Omari Evans potentially still has 3 to 4 more games to prove himself. You don't want another wide receiver into the transfer portal, go out and win a national title, or go out and still look really good for the next 3 games, even if you don't win the championship. Prove that you deserve to be the number 1 or number 2 guy, and he has that opportunity in front of him. So I think you got to be a little concerned about it, but I don't know what else you can do. The production hasn't been great. I know he had a relatively good day against Oregon. He had the touchdown catch, and then he had the catch that was kind of canceled against him. But you have an opportunity to prove yourself. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, we texted a little bit about this. I understand where he's coming from, because you go out there, you grind. He's made plays this year, and
Gruden grinder.
yeah, and you're going to bring in at least 1, maybe 2 more guys from the portal that haven't been there. So I understand why he's frustrated. I disagree, because I just don't think the receiver position has been good enough. The passing game has been better this year, but that's really because of Tyler Warren. Part of that is, to Omari Evans' credit, Omari Evans too, because we are a more explosive passing team this year, and a lot of that is due to him. But the Lions' share of that, no pun intended, was Tyler Warren. He had the best tight end in the country, and that's something you're not going to have next year. So they're going to have to try to replace that production. So it makes sense from a Penn State standpoint to go and look in the portal. Now, do I think no matter who they get, Omari Evans is going to be a big part of this offense next year? Yes.
If he wants to be.
If he wants to be. I mean, and like you said, he's got to prove that he's kind of more than just a one-trick pony, too. That he's more than just...
Another pun.
Oh, God, I'm full of them tonight. That he's more than just a guy that could go run deep and catch the ball. Because it's been kind of spotty otherwise. It's not like he hasn't done anything besides that. But that's been by far his main function on this offense so far.
Absolutely. Let's jump to another question. We'll answer that question last from Einstein von Braun. We'll answer that one a little bit later too. Some SMU questions here, so I want to get to any non-SMU questions. Okay, we're pretty much all to SMU questions. So I'm going to answer Einstein von Braun's question. We'll do this one first from R Scats. R Scats asks, do you make sure Ethan Grunkemeyer gets a snap or two, even if it's just a handoff while Drew is lined up out wide? So I think what he's trying to get at here is, do you somehow incorporate Grunkemeyer into the game plan just to get people thinking about something else? I pose the question to you guys. Does Ethan Grunkemeyer have more or less than 3.5? Did I say passes? I think I said passes during this playoff. And both you and our buddy Higgins said no. I'm more inclined to say yes. At some point, even let's say they blew out SMU, I feel like they might get in there and try to get them some. I'm not saying that's going to happen. But I just feel like at some point, especially the way Drew Aller has been running a little bit more, Grunkemeyer, I'm not saying he completes them, but I feel like he does get some passes. Maybe not 3.5, but Shawn, do they try to incorporate Grunk at all in the game plan?
I don't think so. That's a lot to put on a guy during a playoff run, where you're going to be playing all good teams now. Like there's no Marylands that you could beat up on and try some things, and it's just not going to be that way. Now, if we end up, like you said, getting up big on SMU, if we're up by even 20 in the fourth quarter, could Grunk get in? Sure. At that point, I could see him getting in. But if in the course of a game, if it's close, could I see us just putting him in even for something like a handoff? No. First off, you'd be asking him to hand the ball off in a it sounds kind of funny because it's just a handoff, but that's a high-pressured situation. It's the first time ever in a college game. That ball is going to be hard as a rock in 20-degree weather. There's a lot that goes into it, so I personally wouldn't want to see it. But like I said, if the opportunity presents itself where you're up big in one of these games, and it could happen, sure, then I'm fine with playing him because you never know when you'll need him.
But you're saying maybe keep him in the stable.
Keep him in the stable for now, yeah.
Okay. All right, let's go to this question here from Maddie Ice. Is there a player that's a non-household name among Penn State fans that you think can really factor into these playoffs? It's a great question there from Maddie Ice.
Tick. You go first, Corey.
Talk. Tick.
I feel someone.
I feel like this player is probably known, but how about a Devon J. Thomas? Is that too much of a household name, you think?
I think so, but I'll let it slide.
I just feel like
that's a tough question.
You're going to need to eat up inside. People think of Zane Duran. They think of Abdul Carter. They think of Denai Dennis Sutton. I feel like Devon J. Thomas can, if he starts playing as well as he played at the end of last year, it's going to make me feel a lot better about that interior defensive line that is out a couple guys now. Hakeem Beeman's gone. Alonzo Ford Jr.'s out. Javonte Thomas is going to have a larger role here and is going to be against some good interior offensive linemen. So that's my pick as far as somebody who could really factor into these playoffs. Bless you.
Thanks.
I
Elliott
left you
Wash.
I was gonna say I left you the offense to give you just a layup.
I'm going Elliott Washington. Because I know he's been coming back. I think he might have even been off the injury list going into the Big Ten championship game. I don't think he played, but he's a guy that I know had made plays during the year. And then he went away the last month after the Ohio State game. But up until the Oregon game, we really didn't need him. But we're going to need him during these games, especially when you're playing against a team like SMU that likes to throw the ball around. So I'll go Elliott Washington.
Mark Thomas probably gets this answer correct, and it's probably a good one. He says Nolan Rucci. If that's not a household name. Starting right tackle now with Anthony Dunca out. That seems like the correct answer. So Mark Thomas, congratulations. You've won the best answer for the fan questions. Next question here is from Devin. And Devin says, how confident are you guys in the Penn State defense being able to stop SMU's high-powered offense? Great question, Devin, as we slowly work our way into the SMU preview. I am a little bit concerned, just to be honest with you. I feel like that SMU's got a solid football team. I think Kevin Jennings, their quarterback, although he's only a sophomore, he's put up 3,000 yards and 22 touchdowns and doing some really good things. And they've found a way to score a decent amount of points. They have scored at least 30 points in their last 5 games. So there you have it. That includes, maybe not so many impressive teams, but it does include putting up 34 points on Clemson, and it does include putting up 48 points. Say what you will about Pitt. Still impressive to put 48 points up on Pitt, who typically has a pretty good defensive line. So I am worried. I think that's the one thing maybe Penn State fans aren't thinking about, thinking, like the ones that just don't know anything about SMU. Like, if SMU is able to just throw the ball over the middle of the field like a lot of other teams have against Penn State, it could be an uncomfortable day for the Nittany Lions. So to answer the question just straight up, I am not confident in Penn State's defense being able to stop SMU's high-powered offense for that precise reason.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is going to come down to obviously getting home and being able to contain Jennings because he, on top of being a prolific passer, he's also very athletic. And I think a lot of that's going to come down to keeping him in the pocket because he is at his best when he gets out.
Right.
Because he could either take off and run or he throws a nice deep ball too. And he could beat you downfield. Does a good job keeping his eyes downfield as well. So I think that's really going to be where the game comes down to, is keeping him contained. How concerned am I? Well, I mean, I think there's going to be a healthy level of concern there. Especially after watching the Oregon game. Now, do I think this offense is as good as Oregon's? No. Because they don't have a Tez Johnson per se, but they have good receivers. I don't know, but I just don't think they have one on that level. And Dylan Gabriel is also a 40-year-old man who's seen everything. True. And he's not going to beat himself. And I think if Penn State plays well on Saturday, it's going to involve making Jennings make mistakes because that has been a flaw of his.
I think that's a good point. Yeah, he does have 8 interceptions on the year. I don't think it's going to be like a hot knife through butter like it was for Oregon, right? But Bowling Green was able to move the ball at times against Penn State. Wisconsin receivers could catch the football. They would have probably moved the ball a little bit more against Penn State. So there's just been time. Well, everyone's had at least one drive against Penn State. So I just, at this point, don't worry about the first drive because it doesn't count as far as how the rest of the game is going to go. But you can't give up 3 touchdowns in the first 3 drives like they did against Oregon, which I don't think is going to happen, but still.
It's funny Penn State fans are so much more worried about the defense in the national media.
Yes.
Like the
Yeah.
national media is all like, "Oh, Penn State has a great defense." We're like, "Yeah, are we sure? Are we sure we do? They're good, but
Numbers wise, they look a lot better than I
yes,
think they really are.
yes."
Dear Old White and Blue says, besides Ohio State and Oregon, do you believe SMU would be the third best team Penn State has played all year? I would say yes. I mean, they're what,
Yes.
10th?
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say yes as well.
I don't even know if it's that close, just because I don't know who else they've played.
Yeah, I mean, I know people are trying to say Illinois, Minnesota, but I think
No.
SMU would beat both these teams.
All right. Two more questions here. This next one fun one and one serious one. The serious one here is from Daniel, formerly Daniel of Instagram, made his way over to X. He says, with the atmospheric conditions in State College this weekend, what matchup are you looking forward to? I am going with our offensive line slowly steamrolling SMU's defensive line as we get into the third and fourth quarters. Shawn, I'll let you go first, but unless you need to blow your nose.
Yeah, I'll
What
get to it.
which matchup are you looking at as in relation to the chillier environment?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, trying to run the ball on them. They are very good against the run though. I would caution people, people thinking this will just be some ACC team that will be able to just roll. I think it could be a little more complicated than that. Now, I don't think I don't know if they played a rushing offense like Penn State's, running backs like Nick Singleton yet, but they're very good against the run. They have been. I would still say, and from what Rhett Ashley said, they're going to try to do what they normally do. It's still going to come down to our edge guys against their tackles. Now, Jennings was running for his life pretty much the whole Clemson game. They only got to him once or twice and sacked him, but he was under duress the whole game. And Clemson's pass rush is not as good as Penn State's. So to me, that's where Penn State's either going to win or lose the game. If we're able to get to him, contain him, and sack him a few times, probably going to win the game. So I think that's what it's going to come down to.
Just to give you an idea, SMU allowed 100 yards 5 times rushing. They allowed 180 to Boston College, 103 to Pittsburgh, 132 to Louisville, 134 to BYU, and 148 to Nevada. So that actually might have been 6. Have not allowed 100 yards to a team since that Boston College game. So the last 3 games, including against Clemson, they held Clemson to 64 yards rushing. So they actually have the same yards per play allowed as Penn State. They both are tied for 9th in the country. So they're good. Now, again, is the competition the same? Probably not, but I think they're good enough where you got to definitely respect it. And I don't think that's going to be a steamrolling. So anyway, my matchup, kind of to a similar thing, but I'm going to just go with the Penn State receiving core. I because of that reason, I think you're going to have to loosen them up a little bit through the air. And I don't think they're going to have as much success. I feel like people are high because of what Katron Allen and Nick Singleton did with Oregon. I don't think they're going to have as much success as you kind of mentioned. And I think they're going to need to be able to throw the ball and catch the football in that cold environment to move the sticks from time to time. So, and get Drew Aller some confidence, because I know Drew Aller is playing good football, but he is still kind of streaky when it comes to good and bad. Even against that Oregon,
Yep.
in that Oregon game, we saw that. So getting him some confidence, catching the football is going to be huge early on.
Yep, that's a good point too. I want to see consistency from Drew, because that's the one thing that what's one of the things he struggles with sometimes is just, remember Cliff would go through some lulls, except his lulls would usually involve turning the ball over like twice in a row. Like Drew kind of goes through similar things, except he just
Yeah.
misses throws. And you just look and you're like, how did he miss that? So yes, consistency is going to be key for him.
All right. We got one more kind of fun question. This is from Einstein von Braun. Einstein von Braun's question is, who is the most insufferable Penn State basher?
Ooh,
Joel
yes.
Klatt. I forget what was Chris Felicia's the Bear.
The Bear. I didn't know who he was until like last week. I thought they were different people.
Or Nicole Auerbach. Shawn, do you want to go first or do you want me to go first?
Yes, I'm going first.
Okay,
Joel Klatt is the easy answer. I can't stand him at all. Anything about Joel Klatt. And it's not even just Penn State. First off, he talks down to, like, if you ever sat through one of his podcasts, it's just talking down to people all the time. And look, when you have a podcast, you're gonna come off sometimes like a know-it-all, right, because you're yes. And I try not to. I try my best not to, because I certainly don't know everything. I'm kind of an idiot myself. But you do have to be somewhat educated on a topic if you're going to go and talk about it, usually. But God, he comes off as so freaking preachy. And then just like the big noon stuff. Like, here's the thing, Joel. I'm okay with you working for Fox. I get it. You can't criticize your bosses. I understand. I can't criticize
them either.
Yeah, I can't criticize our bosses. That's just the way it works. Not that I have anything to criticize them about, but I can't go out here and rip our bosses. Sure. You know what you do? You take your paycheck and you say nothing about Big Noon Kickoff. Don't try to tell us that it's something great when everybody knows it blows. And it doesn't matter who's to blame for it, because you could certainly put some blame on the Big Ten for agreeing to it. I don't care. This never existed before Fox went and did it. And don't tell us about how wonderful it is. And if you haven't seen it already, he made he alluded to the whiteout being at noon this week. And he made it like, oh, well, he didn't say this in so many words, but if you could do it at noon now, how come you can't do it with Fox? Well, very easy. When you have there's this thing called the regular season where you play 7 home games and you have multiple options to have your whiteout. In the playoff, there's only one game that you get at home, so you just have to kind of play the cards that are dealt to you. So that's really the difference, Joel. In case you didn't know how college football in reality works.
I'll make sure to clip that and send it over to him.
What a freaking tool bag.
What a tool bag. Einstein, you got Shawn fired up here on a Wednesday or Thursday evening, so appreciate that. I think a lot of people assume I would take Nicole Auerbach. I do think that she kind of like came out of left field. Like, she was working for The Athletic, and next, like, now she's like almost the face of like the I guess the female face of college football. I think she's probably even past Heather Dinich now at this point, which that's not really a race I want to watch. I don't think she's a true Penn State basher. I think now that she works for NBC, is a complete Notre Dame homer, which I don't appreciate. But I don't think she's necessarily a Penn State basher. I think she was just trying to promote Notre Dame over Penn State because that's just what needed to be done at the time. I don't think she hates Penn State specifically. I think she just wants the best for Notre Dame. I'm gonna go out there with a random one, and maybe that's not on this list. And I'm gonna go with Greg McElroy. I think.
Okay.
Greg McElroy is a known hater. If you ever listen to any of the stuff they have, he is constantly asking who is Penn State beat, who is Penn State beat, who is Penn State beat, as if his entire job when he was playing college football wasn't just to hand the football off. Shawn and I both could have played quarterback for Alabama during a couple of those years. In fact, the reason they didn't win more titles is because they still had some pretty average quarterback play. I think it just going on a tangent here, just goes to show like what Alabama was capable of once they did have some good quarterbacks. Like when they got Tua, it was like, oh wow, this team's way more than just running the rock up the middle. So Greg McElroy has always rubbed me the wrong way. You could go a long list there with Feinbaum and some of those other SEC people, but McElroy is a known SEC homer, and he seems to go out of his way to talk about Penn State. So
yeah, the what's his name? Stuart Mandel too had us losing in the first round.
Yeah, actually,
which I mean, you're free to think, but
I screenshotted his. He wrote again about it today on The Athletic about how SMU is going to upset Penn State, and the reasons he said it was just hilarious. So hopefully I'll have an opportunity to make fun of him for that.
yeah. And then your favorite guy, Ari Wasserman, he's another person.
Yeah.
running.
See, but again, I don't know if he's a Penn State basher as much as he's just an Ohio State fan.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true.
Like he's just a known Ohio State fan. I think he lives in Columbus.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's open about being an Ohio State fan.
Yeah.
Like
Which
I think he used to work
appreciate.
at 11 Warriors or whatever that website is, which is an Ohio State website.
Just Bo Prabila news real quick. Saw he's going to be taking a visit to Ole Miss. So would not have expected Ole Miss taking our seconds, but there you go.
Yeah, honestly, would it be a horrible fit, right?
No, I don't think so. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know if he's a good enough thrower for that offense, but he also hadn't had a ton of opportunity to really show that. So who knows?
Lane would
Shawn,
probably want to work him out before offering him for that reason.
Shawn, let's transition over to talking about SMU completely here. We mentioned Kevin Jennings already. That offense. What are your thoughts on the SMU role players around there? The receivers. Let's just start with the receivers. They got a handful of guys that have about 300 to 600 yards. They got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I think 8 receivers, tight ends, running backs that are all right around 275 to 600. So the ball is getting around to a lot of different guys. They got 5 guys that have at least 4 touchdowns or 5 touchdowns on the year as well. So the ball is democratically being passed around. They got 1, 2, 3, almost 4 guys that have over 15 yards per catch. So some big plays sprinkled in there as well. But maybe nobody that's you're specifically overly concerned about.
Yeah, that's a pretty good way to put it. It's kind of how wide receiver by committee is supposed to work. You know, we've tried to do that before. That definitely doesn't look like how this ended up being. But yeah, they get a lot of guys involved. They have a bunch of guys with over 20 catches. They even get the tight ends involved. I know Maryland, RJ Maryland, their tight end, he's been out since October. He was having a very, very good year. But they still have a tight end who Hibner who gets involved too. Their running back too actually played wide receiver at Miami, ends up transferring into SMU. And he also has, in addition to having 1,200 yards on the ground, he also has 300 yards receiving. So they get a lot of guys involved. And they're all really good because you could have wide receiver by committee where there's not one star and it doesn't really have a rhyme or reason because they're not that good. But that is not the case here. They just have a bunch of really, really talented guys.
Yeah, you mentioned Brashard Smith there, over 1,200 yards rushing, almost 6 yards per carry. He also has 14 touchdowns. So doing some really good things there. The second leading rusher is their quarterback, like you mentioned, Kevin Jennings, averaging 4 yards per carry, and has a little bit of the ability to house it too. His longest run is 59 yards. So it's not like he's Drew Aller who can, pick up a first down here and there. He does actually have some true running abilities. Where do we want to go from here, Shawn? I was going to go to offensive line, but if you have any other thoughts on the skill position guys first, please go ahead.
Yeah. Just basically what we said. A lot of different guys that could beat you. I noticed they don't, Jennings is their second leading rusher, so it's going to be mostly Smith toting the rock.
Yeah.
And, that's enough to get it done, though. But yeah, we could talk about their offensive line because I think when we look at their offensive line, that'll make Penn State fans feel a little more optimistic.
Yeah, I mean their left tackle is going to be a lot easier assignment for Abdul Carter, in their right tackle as well. They are doing a pretty good job relatively when you look at the rest of the country as far as sacks allowed. They are 22nd in sacks allowed. They've allowed 15 sacks this year. If you're curious, Penn State's sitting there at 12 sacks allowed. When you look at tackles for loss allowed, they're a little bit further down the list. They're sitting there at 59th in the country in TFLs allowed. Just to give you an idea of a team Penn State's faced around there, Maryland's sitting there at 71st. So I don't know if that helps kind of gauge you an idea of where SMU is relatively at in relation to Maryland, but they're allowing a little bit more TFLs. You got to keep in mind, though, they also had to play Duke, and Manny Diaz and company got a bunch of TFLs against them, as which Manny Diaz always does against everybody he plays. But a little bit more leaky there. I think there's an opportunity for some. And here's Shawn is kind of where I get a little bit nervous is if Tom Allen decided to, they could rack up a bunch of TFLs, I think, in this game. But it doesn't ever seem that, besides maybe a handful of halves I could count on throughout the season, doesn't really seem like Penn State's really tried to do that often. But I would like to maybe see them do it more on Saturday.
Yeah, I like tackles for loss. They make me happy when they're not going against my team. So yes, and the easy thing to ask is, well, how do you do it then? Well, blitzing, like trying to force the issue. Now, I think, to be honest with you, I don't think Allen's going to do a whole lot of blitzing in this game just because he's worried about Jennings getting outside the pocket. I'm not saying I disagree with you. I just know how Tom Allen thinks. And
no, I agree with you 100%. I agree.
And I just think that's going to be that. I actually think you could see a lot more, and we did this a lot in the Big Ten championship game. You're going to see a lot of Abdul Carter spying. We did it against Ohio State too, so I think that'll be a big emphasis for us.
That's a good point.
So, which is something I'm not really opposed to, because then you could theoretically get a little more aggressive with having him there, because he's just as fast as Jennings is. That's the benefit of having a guy like Abdul Carter. You can do so many different things with him.
Absolutely. Real quick, I'll just note, since we're talking about offense, defense, Jalen Reed was confirmed to be 100%. No issues after the car accident that he was in. So they will have Jalen Reed on Saturday there. Third down conversion percentage, SMU is pretty much right where Penn State is, right around 45-ish%. So no big discrepancy there. I got to talk about touchdown, red zone touchdown percentage. And SMU is sitting there at 38. So not crazy different from Penn State, that's at 25. But they're sitting there scoring touchdowns in the red zone 68% of the time. So not as good as, say, in Ohio State, who Penn State played earlier this year. They're not as lethal in the red zone, but still, they're a top 10 team. They're not going to be bad in that category, but perhaps an opportunity for Penn State to bend a little bit but not break.
Yeah. I think when you play against a team like this that likes to spread you out, well, when you get to the red zone, naturally, you have less grass to work with. So sometimes when you have a team like this, when the field gets tighter and tighter, especially if you don't have a really good offensive line to lean on, it could be more difficult to score in the red zone. So I think that's where Penn State, this Penn State defense could really clamp. And again, that's a style that I think Tom Allen is very comfortable playing with. I think he's fine with giving you till the 30-yard line. It drives me crazy, but it does work.
Drives me crazy too.
It does mostly work, because if you look statistically, our defense is really good. But I think they're going to be fine with letting them get to the 45, letting them get to the 30, because then you're just kind of waiting. You're like, and then Abdul Carter gets a sack, and then they're out of field goal range, and then they're either trying to punt or they're trying a long field goal and they miss. How many drives have gone that way this year? So I think Penn State's very happy with living there with that.
Yeah, and one thing I'll just bring up, you look at one of SMU's toughest games where they played Duke into overtime. SMU only had 21 points in regulation against Duke. And so you start looking at like, okay, what did Duke do well? Well, nothing really. I mean, SMU still had 470 yards of offense. the difference in this game, SMU had 7 penalties, but they also had 6 turnovers. They lost 3 fumbles and they had 3 interceptions in that game. And that to me is kind of a pretty big hint that this is a good SMU football team that is going to score points. But there is an opportunity there to get some turnovers, and they do play a little sloppy at times. And I feel like you're exactly right. Tom Allen's just going to lean into that a little bit more. And we'll see. But Duke should have won that football game, and they weren't able to really take advantage completely of all the turnovers that they got. So if Penn State has those opportunities, not only do they have to, get them, say a fumble on the ground like the Big Ten championship against Oregon, but then the offense obviously is going to need to convert that into points.
Yeah, you got to make them pay for turnovers, which is what great teams do. The other team makes a mistake, you make them pay. You don't just punt the ball right back to them.
Right. Let's flip it. Let's go talk about the SMU defense. Again, we talked a little bit already about the running defense, specifically on some of the fan questions, so we don't have to harp too much into that. But I do think it's important to note that they are a stout run defense. They do some really good things up front, and I don't think it's going to be a walk in the park for the Penn State offensive line. I think they're going to have to earn it. They're going to have to soften them with some throws behind them. And there's going to be some challenges for them. Overall, total defense, SMU's 28th in the country. So they're good, but they're nothing crazy in that regard. Bowling Green is 29th in the country, just to give you an idea of, a good team, but maybe not great. It's kind of funny because sitting there at 35 is Georgia. So take that for what you will. But again, a good team. I think they do a little bit better job on the ground than through the air. So I'm curious, how much is Andy Kotelnicki going to try to test this pass defense of SMU?
Yeah. And the problem with playing a game up here, and I'm happy we're playing it here. I think it benefits Penn State. But the problem is, I think Andy Kotelnicki would like to air it out too. But it's going to be gusty. It's going to be cold. And you're going to have to trust your receivers to hang on to the ball. And I know Drew could throw it. That's one of the benefits of having a big arm quarterback, is this really wouldn't affect him all that much. But your receivers still have to catch the ball. Now, I'm sure they've been dipping the ball in ice water all week and everything, and that's all well and good, but doesn't really prepare you for getting hit. Getting that ball, it feels like a rock hit in your hands, and then
nothing hurts more.
Yeah, and then get killed on a hit. The hits hurt more in the cold weather, and then you got to hang on to the ball to the ground. It's hard to do. Now, I think Penn State wants to do that. I think that's the plan. But executing that will be tough. So ultimately, you want to continue that. You want to string games together where you run the ball well. But I think people, let me put it this way. I think people are crowning the our rushing offense a little early.
Me too.
Because just 3 weeks ago now, we were talking about what's wrong with the run game.
Yeah.
And then the Big Ten championship game happened. We ran all over them. And now everybody's back to saying, oh, they're the best combo since Lendell White and Reggie Bush. And it's like, guys, the answer's somewhere in the middle here. And this, I might even wager to say they might be better. They might have a better rush defense than Oregon does.
I think that's not.
I mean,
I don't think that's crazy to say. We
Yeah,
talked
now
about how
Oregon's
there
pass
were
rush
some.
is better, but
Right.
I'm just talking about run defense specifically.
We talked about that before the Big Ten championship, that was something that was possible, that Penn State should be able to run the rock a little bit on Oregon, and they were able to. So I think that's completely reasonable to say. The other thing to keep in mind about this team is that, yes, their SMU struggles a little bit on the turnover differential, but if you look at just interceptions, they're 15th in the country interceptions. So throwing the ball,
Yep.
They're very opportunistic. They've got 15 picks on the year. Now, if you put in PSU, you're looking at Penn State sitting there with 12. So they're able to to take advantage of their opportunities and pick the football off. The reason they don't have a higher turnover margin is because their offense is also turning the ball over, but their defense is getting turnovers. And so not that Drew Aller has been just, I guess, careless with the football. He did have 2 picks against Oregon. And you kind of have to weigh that kind of gunslinger mentality versus conservative mentality, and you want to fall somewhere in the middle. But they're going to have to throw the ball, I think, in my opinion, to be able to beat SMU. I don't think they're going to be able to lean completely on the run game. Shawn, any defenders stick out to you that you wanted to point out?
Yeah, they do have they do have multiple guys that have at least 3 interceptions. I'm happy you brought that up. They have a guy that had 110 tackles, and they get after the quarterback. They had 40 sacks this year, which I feel like that's something that people can't look past either. So I don't want Penn State
It's
fans.
almost like this is a good team.
Yeah, I feel like SMU, because of ESPN and the SEC, SMU just kind of gets pooped on constantly for no reason. Like
because they wanted Alabama in.
Yeah, but this is a really good team. Now, is it true that they haven't really beaten anybody yet? Okay, that's fair. But they play really well every week. I mean, when they lost to BYU in the beginning of the year, their backup quarterback, Stone, was the quarterback. So they didn't even have Jennings yet playing. And you look at that game, it was a low-scoring game. It almost looks like an anomaly because it was. And then this past week against Clemson, they have a bad start, which you can't have against a really good team. Like if they have a bad start against Penn State this week, they're probably not cutting it to 3 points at the end of the game. Penn State's defense, they're not coming back then. But you take that bad start away, yeah, they probably win the game. They almost did. So yeah, this is a really good team, and I think the national media is taking them lightly because everybody and their mother's been pooping on them the last month.
Absolutely. You mentioned the sacks. Yeah, I just wanted to mention the 2 defensive ends, Harvey and Smith. Basically 7 sacks between those 2 guys alone. They got another guy, Harrison Hunt, that has 6 sacks, and then they got another guy, that Roberts, who has 5.5 sacks. So they got basically 4 guys that can get after the passer. And so when you're looking at that, I mean, it's not going to be easy for Penn State, and I'm curious to see what the reaction is when Penn State, if they do struggle on offense a little bit from the crowd. I think, again, people are coming in. I think people are putting SMU on like a Minnesota level. And
I see people saying it on Twitter.
And I don't think that's fair.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't be like the SEC fans that think, oh, well, we're the Big Ten. They don't play football like against teams like us, man.
Yeah.
Don't be that guy. Don't be that guy that thinks there's only good football here.
Yeah. Especially given that
it's the road to ruin.
And they have a lot of transfer guys. So these guys aren't like an SMU recruited football team. This is a transfer portal team that has sprinkled in with a lot of talent.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a good point too. Like, they've gotten talent from a lot of places. They're well coached. And I think, is there a road for Penn State to win? Of course. Yeah, I still feel, well, we'll get in our picks, but I still feel pretty confident going in. But all these people that think we're just going to beat this team by like 30 points, I don't think you really understand what you're getting into here.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, just one last thing I want to say defensively. SMU also passes defended, 3rd in the country with 75 passes defended. So a lot of statistics are pointing towards them being a pretty good team. They're top 10 in sacks. They're top 10 in TFLs. They're top 5 in passes defended. I know their competition isn't as good, which, okay, bump them down the peg. Still a really good football team. And so wanted to mention that as well. Real quick, Shawn, before we get into our predictions here, I just wanted to also mention kicking. Colin Rogers, 23 of 31 this year, 74%. But I should really clarify. He is perfect from inside of. No, he's not perfect. I'm sorry. He's 2 misses inside of 29. I was gonna say he was perfect inside of 40 because I was gonna make a inside of 40 joke. But he does have most of his misses coming from 40 and 50 plus. He's missed 6 from 40 plus this year. So most of them coming from outside college football. Basically, he's a normal college football kicker, so to speak.
Yeah, 8 of 10 for 40 to 49. That was pretty good.
Yeah, I'd take 7 from 11 from 50 plus is good too.
Yeah. Yeah, you're making over 50% of your kicks from 50.
Long of 55. So I would say he's a pretty damn good kicker. But again, I feel good if Penn State's holding them to field goals that Penn State's going to win a football game. But Shawn, are you ready to go into your picks and your bold picks?
Let's do it.
I think I went first with the Big Ten championship.
Yep, so I got this.
So it's all you, Boo. Take it away.
All right, guys. So another week. Biggest one in a long time for us. And an important one, right? Like if Penn State loses this game, ooh boy, all this goodwill that's been built up, oof, gone. And it's not gonna be great. This is a good team that we're playing. I think we've done a really good job going over them and talking about all the things that they do well. But there are ways that Penn State can win this game. As we stated, they struggle with turnovers. They struggle with penalties. These are things that you might be able to get away with teams that you're better than, but they're going to add up when you're playing against a team that has more talent than you. Penn State does have more talent than SMU. So, with that, and with the matchups that we have at defensive end against their tackles, I like Penn State to win this one. I think it will be a happy valley on Saturday. I think you're going to see some big plays from SMU here and there. Don't panic. I think the boys will be able to pull this out. I have Penn State winning and covering by a score of 28-16. Corey pointed out field goals, red zone. I think we're going to force them to kick a few field goals in there. Penn State's going to score touchdowns. And somebody who I don't even think we talked about. I don't know how, but I don't think we did. Tyler effing Warren. 2 touchdowns for him in his last game at the Beeve. That's the bold prediction. Because there isn't a team outside of Ohio State that could really match up with what he does.
We take Tyler Warren for granted on this show.
We really do. I am ashamed of us that we did not mention him.
It's very easy for him to be the X factor yet again in this because you're right. Nobody matches up with him well besides a Caleb Downs. Good pick, Shawn. Good pick.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. So my prediction here. Just want to stop for a second, and I know people have been talking a lot about the attendance. Again, I don't really care if you go or don't go. I will say this. My one pitch to you is we are going to be seeing history on Saturday. It'll be the Penn State's first ever playoff game. It'll be Penn State's first ever time hosting a playoff game. I know it's not against an Alabama. I know it's not against a Tennessee. It's kind of cool, though, in a sense, because of the history we do have with SMU and the We Are Penn State and the Cotton Bowl and all those things. I think there's some poetic justice to it. And I'm really excited just to be there and to be a spectator, to be a witness to what will unfold on Saturday. I think that's really exciting. I think this SMU team is really, really good. I think people are underestimating it. I really don't think it's a great matchup for Penn State. I think if college football is all about matchups, I don't think this is a good matchup for Penn State whatsoever. They like to throw the ball, and Penn State struggles at times to defend the pass. They have a pretty good defense against the run. and Penn State would prefer to run the ball if they could. So they're able to get some turnovers. Penn State doesn't really ever seem to get very many turnovers. So just a lot of things aren't really going in Penn State's favor. I do think Penn State has obviously more talent than SMU, but if the talent pool was equal, I think SMU would win this football game. But I think honestly this game is a must-win game for James Franklin. I don't see it any other way. You have to win this football game. You have to do it. I don't care how you do it. I don't care if you win by 1 point or if you win by 50. You cannot lose this football game if you're Penn State and James Franklin. And so with that, I am going to assume because you can't lose it, you won't lose it, and Penn State gets the win. I am going 31-24. I think there's going to be a little bit more scoring, and I just, again, chalk up a quick 7 points to SMU. I just don't see a way where a Tom Allen-led defense doesn't give up a quick, cheap 7 to start the game. So I got Penn State winning 31-24. And you know what? As much as I kind of hate going into the whole cold atmosphere kind of thing and think that's getting completely overplayed, why not? Penn State forces at least 3 turnovers in their win against SMU, and that's the difference, kind of like it was, or almost like it was for Duke against them a little bit earlier in the year. So 3 turnovers. I honestly think it's more likely to have 2 forced fumbles than 2 interceptions. But I think Penn State gets the win, and they do so by forcing turnovers, something they really haven't done all year.
That is an interesting pick. You have them scoring 24 points and having 3 turnovers.
Yeah.
So I have an even bolder prediction for you.
Okay.
No punts.
No punts.
SMU.
I really
think if
think
they do that, they're probably not punting the ball.
Right.
It would be crazy.
I really think they're going to move the football, and it's going to come down to the maroon zone, the red zone, which, again, if you're Penn State, you're like, ugh, I don't want it to come down to that. But I think Penn State's able to flex a little bit, get a couple turnovers in the maroon zone. Because of that, they're not going to go down and score because it's not a short field every time. But yeah,
we don't believe in having short fields here.
No, it's been a terrible year for the starting
we like
field
to start
position.
At 10 and just go 90 yards.
Exactly. So, sorry for coming on live a little bit earlier, but that's it. That's our first ever, Shawn, college football playoff preview episode.
Let's do 3 more of these.
That'd be fun. I could get used to it. Thank you guys for watching live on YouTube if you haven't already. Oh, and just quickly, Dan asked what point total wins for PSU. I think if you put up 30, you win. That's kind of why I didn't answer the question 20 minutes ago. I think you get 30, you're going to win this game. I don't see the defense giving up 30.
I would agree with that. Yes. Yeah, I think 30, you're good. Anything less, it's a game. It's close.
Absolutely. Again, thank you guys for watching live on YouTube. If you haven't already, please make sure to like the video and subscribe. If you're listening on podcasts, whatever podcast platform that may be, please make sure to subscribe there. Double check. Sometimes people think they are and they're not. And then, Shawn, hopefully we'll be recapping a Penn State victory sometime. We'll probably do a Monday show. I don't think Sunday's going to work for me, so we'll probably be back Monday. For Shawn Kane, I'm Cory Lestochi. You've been listening to Hardcore Penn State